Click back on your Files view and go ahead and open about.html. So we just have a little bit of text here. If I put my cursor after leisure and hit my return key, we'll go ahead and put an image in here. But let's talk about the image types first. So what kind of images can you put inside of Dreamweaver? You can put JPEGs, GIFs, some people call them GIF, it just depends, either way is correct, PNG files, and Photoshop files as smart objects. There's many different ways to add an image into your document. We're going to start with our Insert menu. If I go to Insert and Image, I can simply put an image into my document. Let's go to Image and Objects and see the different types of images that we can place. So Image, Placeholder, Rollover Image, and a Fireworks HTML. Let's just choose Image Placeholder. An image placeholder is great for when you know that you're going to place an image into your file, but maybe you don't have your Photoshop file yet. So I can use an image placeholder for my width and my height, give it a color, and put some alternate text in here. The great thing about putting alternate text in here is that when I replace it with the actual file, my alt text will stay with the file. We're not going to put a name for this one. We're going to give it 75 for my width and 75 also for my height. We're going to give it a color, and I'm just going to choose something incredibly ugly. That way, if I'm looking at my files, I can see an incredibly ugly color staring at me, and I think, wow, I need to make sure and change that and replace it with the correct image. This is going to be all about beaches. Your alt text really can be anything that it needs to be for that particular image. You want to make sure and give it a description. Your alt text doesn't have to follow the same sort of naming convention rules that we've followed so far. So it can have spaces, capitals, and punctuation inside of your alternate text. Just make sure that it fits the description of the image. We put our alternate text on our images so that they can be accessible by screen readers. So if somebody who's blind is trying to view your website, you know automatically that they're going to know what the image is about, even if they can't see it. We'll go ahead and click OK. And if you take a look at your property inspector, you'll see that we have a width and the height for our image and our alt text. Now, replacing this is really very simple. If I twirl down the arrow for my assets and then for my images, I'm going to move this just over a little bit so I can actually see. We have a folder inside of our images called Small. And I will scroll down just a little bit. In your property inspector, where it says Source, there's a point to file, a little target. I'm going to grab that and I'm going to point it to my surfers. You scroll my page back over. So now I have my source, I have my alt text, beaches. If I want to change this, I certainly can. Maybe I'll change this to beaches with surfers. And I just click my enter or return key to make sure the field takes my changes. It's also not a bad idea to make sure that you name your images as you go along. If we need to make a disjointed image at some point, the dialog box that we'll be working with, you won't see the actual image. So you'll see a list of the images on your page. If you don't name your images, you'll just get an untitled image and you won't know which one to choose. So we'll just call this Surfers. So let's take a look at the rest of our options inside of our property inspector when we have an image selected. So we've already chosen the width and the height of our image. We have a source as well. We just chose the source for this particular image. And if I wanted to change it, I could just either point to another file or click on the folder and navigate to another file. We've added our alt text in. We could give an image a class style. Again, we'll talk more about CSS in just a little bit. I can edit that image in either Photoshop, or if I right-click on it, I can then choose whatever program I would like to edit it with. I've got some edit image settings here as well. And I can update from original. You'll notice that that is grayed out. It's not a Photoshop file, so I can't update from original. I can choose a border. My border is fairly important just because if I have this being a link to something else, if I don't have my CSS set correctly, if this turns into a link and I don't have a border, then I will end up with a border around my image thinking that it is a regular link, and it's going to put whatever color that I have for my links around the edge. So we'll just type 0 there. I can crop inside of Dreamweaver. I can resample that image. I can change the brightness and the contrast and change the sharpening of this image as well. I have some alignment features, so I can align to the top, bottom, right, etc. For the most part, we'll use CSS to change our alignment and not our actual HTML features, because that way we can update it through the CSS and not have to touch the image back on the page again. If I had a link for this particular image, I would have a target, and I also have a place for an original. So I could link this to an original Photoshop file. My VSpace and my HSpace is something that, while it's still in my property inspector, we don't use it much anymore. If I put a VSpace or an HSpace in here, for instance, I'll just put 5 for each, you'll notice that now I have a spacing of 5 all the way around my image, and that may not be what I'm after. Once again, CSS to the rescue, and any changes that we would like to make, whether we need space on the right, on the top, on the bottom, or the left-hand side, can all be done strictly through CSS. Changing our HSpace and our VSpace, and I'll just delete these, affects the code itself in the HTML. It's always better whenever possible to use your CSS. I also have the ability to map a file, and we'll do that in just a little bit. So that's one way to insert an image. We're going to go ahead and delete that one, leaving our cursor right there. From our file menu, I can take a file. I'm just going to grab one of the small ones again, and I can just drag that into my file. It pops up with my accessibility attributes for my image tag. This allows me to add some alt text to this particular file before it actually goes into my page. When we took a look at our preferences, we saw that we had a checkbox next to all of those options to make sure that we added our alternate text or accessibility options for our forms and our images, etc. So I'm going to type Pelican Island. And click OK. So if we look at our property inspector, we see that our source is our small image over on the side, and our alt text is Pelican Island. Okay, let's put our cursor to the side of that and hit enter or return. And if we go to our assets and our images, and I find my Pelican Isle _ small, I can either drag from here as well, or where my cursor is sitting in my document, I can just click on Insert. And I'll just type that again, and there's my file. And if you happen to like keyboard shortcuts, let me just go ahead and delete this one. On the Mac, it would be Command and Option. On the PC, it would be Alt and Control I. And that will bring up my Insert menu and Image. Now I can just navigate to my Images folder, Small, and this time I'll pick Flower. When I choose, I still get that same dialog box that allows me to put my alternate text in. So when we put images in our file, we can either use our Insert menu, we can use our Files panel, or our Assets panel.